Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
Joining me, my co-host, who's looking at his computer for something, is Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on? How you doing?
What's up, Billy? How's it going, buddy?
Doing good. Doing good. Very interesting guest this week. Lura Forcum from the Independent. What's the name of it?
Independent Center.
Independent Center. Really just, it was a great conversation, very, very interesting about, voting as an independent. I think, we tend to, trying to tighten my microphone as I talk here. We tend to think about, independent voters as like a
third party.
Exactly. And really it's not. It's it's basically just giving you kind of the freedom to vote for, who you want, vote for the ideals rather than the party. And I think that's what a lot of what we talked about with Laura was.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great conversation, and we also talk about, what the problems are with both parties and the two-party system in general. And what we're looking going forward in our leadership, so it was really phenomenal. She talks a lot about the Independent Center and their mission and independent voting in general, and how right now they get such big power to independent voters because they sway elections. So it's so important, and it's really, we talk a lot, Bill, we talk big picture stuff, but then we also talked about, starting at the local level.
Right.
Like, it's not just the presidency that we're talking about. We're talking about, local politics and getting involved in your community. And that's where the change starts.
Right.
You can't expect to change at the top unless you start changing at the bottom first.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And we've talked about that as well before. I think we kind of talked about that with Bruce, when we would have him on.
Sure.
So, how to change things. And that's really how you have to do it, the grassroots level, the local level. So, yeah, but a very interesting conversation, Laura. Hope you guys enjoy it. Really was a great interview. We loved having her on. Yeah, and if you like the episode, give us a like and make sure you subscribe. And make sure you comment also, because we'd love to hear your feedback.
We do. All right, everybody, enjoy. This was a great episode.
All right.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to announce to everybody that the That's Enough Out of You podcast is proud that we're going to sponsor the JFK Lancers November in Dallas conference. It's going to be November 21st through November 23rd at the Fairmont in Dallas, Texas. A lot of great speakers, researchers on the JFK assassination. And if you use our podcast promo, the That's Enough Out of You podcast promo code JFK10, you get 10% off the ticket. That's promo code JFK10. And you can find the tickets at the website assassinationconference.com, and a lot of great speakers. Paul Abbott is going to be there. A lot that we had on our show: Paul Abbott, Paul Blow, Johnny Kearns, Walter Herbst, Jeff Meek, Linda Giovanni Zambonini, who's coming up on our show. And a lot of other great researchers, and it's about the JFK assassination. So again, we're proud to promote this event. It's November 21st through November 23rd at the Fairmont in Dallas, Texas. The website is assassinationconference.com, and the That's Enough Out of You promo code is JFK10, and you get 10% off the ticket. So it's definitely going to be worth it, and I hope people are going to come out and enjoy the event. Unfortunately, Bill and I can't make it, but I know it's going to be a great event because the speakers are tremendous. So any other information that you want, you can message me and I could get that for you, or I could put you in contact with somebody who can answer the questions for you. Again, thank you, everybody.
All right, Sean, we have Lura Forcum with us today from the Independence Center. This is exciting, very interesting stuff. We've been well, a couple of hits and misses here and there. We've been trying to get this together for a little while, but we appreciate you coming on with us, Laura.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. All right, you want to give us a little bit about yourself, a little background, and how you got into this?
Absolutely. So I am somebody who's been interested in politics for a really long time, but it has never made sense for me to work in politics. And I think what I finally realized is it's because I'm an independent, and there's not a lot of space in politics for independents. So I actually, before joining the Independence Center about 8 months ago, I had left academia to come back to the policy world, because what I'm really interested in is getting people to communicate and understand public policy choices. But prior to that, I was a marketing professor for 7 years. I have a PhD in consumer psychology. And my big interest is, like, how do you reach people with complicated ideas, and how do you understand what they think about complicated ideas, especially as it relates to public policy and to governing?
Talk to me a little bit about the Independence Center, what it is, and give us a little rundown on it.
Yeah, so the Independence Center works with an audience of, at this point, almost 500,000 people who are just interested in independent politics. And we define independents as just people who are nonpartisans. So they might vote for a third party, but they also might vote, split their ticket or swing vote. So we don't really have a litmus test of policy issues or like political philosophy, but these are just people who are kind of dissatisfied with both parties. And what we're trying to do is create an identity or a movement of people who feel like they are political, even though they're not members of a party. Because I think the overwhelming message people get in political discourse is that if you're not a Democrat or a Republican, you're not political, you're not engaged. And so we're trying to make this identity which says, like, hey, you should vote the way you think is best, and we want to help you do that. But like, what is really important to our process is making sure that everybody is enfranchised to vote. And so we provide a lot of educational resources. We try to help get independents in front of the press so that their ideas are represented in the media. And we give them information about how you can register to be an independent in your state and what that means for you, because it's different in almost every state.
So, Laura, in our state, we're in Pennsylvania. One of the drawbacks to being registered as an independent is that you can't vote in a primary election.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in small municipalities like where we are, sometimes those primary elections are what determines, the winner, because the general election, sometimes there's not even an opponent. So it would be very difficult, for us to participate, in the process if we were independents living in that area.
And we recognize that, and we think it's really important for voters to know, because in the case of you guys, you might say, well, you know what, actually, I'd like to have an influence on the Democratic primary process, or I'm more interested in having an influence in the Republican primary process. So I'm going to register that way. But how I think about myself is a little bit more complicated than that. So we have resources on our website that just help people think through that issue, because in states like mine, there is no party ID on your voter registration. So we have a very different set of rules for participating in primaries. And we just want people to understand what are the implications if they decide to register a certain way in their state for political participation.
Talk to me about what the mission statement of the Independence Center is, and would you say one of the goals is to try to create multiple parties to eliminate this two-party system, which has a variety of problems?
Mm-hmm. So the Independence Center is a nonprofit, a 501c3, so we can't be a political party. We are an educational organization, and our mission is really to support and enfranchise independent voters through education. So we just want them to know, if you don't see yourself as a member of either party, here's what political participation could look like for you. And our thinking is that by enfranchising these voters and by making sure they see a path to political participation, that's how you would end up with a third party if that's what voters are actually saying they need. Maybe it will mean that there's a third party. Maybe it will mean, and I should qualify that, right? Because there are third parties, there are other parties. And whenever people say, what if we had a third party? A lot of libertarians raise their hand and say, excuse me, you have a third party. So yes, in terms of like, would there be additional parties? I think that's a question for voters. And to me, the important thing is, let's make sure we understand what they want and we get their voices reflected in the political process and the voting process, because that's what makes stable representative democracy.
Bill, do you have something?
Her name's escaping me right now, but during the 2020 election in Georgia, and Sean, maybe you can help me. There was Stacey Abrams. What was vital in that election, just in the fact that she would go into some of these, these poor neighborhoods, people who were not really, felt like they either didn't want to or didn't care about participating, and she would educate them. And I don't know if I'm sure there was some political bias, but there, for the most part, there was, this is what this election will mean for you. Mm-hmm. And trying to, sort of at a grassroots level, impress upon people who wouldn't normally vote how important it is for them to vote. Mm-hmm. It would seem to me that there's so many people right now who are disenfranchised. Just the just disgusting nature of what's happening in Washington. People are just either wanting to, unplug and get away from it, or just saying, you know what, I don't like either party right now. Mm-hmm. So what is your message to somebody who either, is completely disinterested or is just fed up with everything? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we hear that from a lot of people. We do a lot of research through focus groups and interviews with either people who are members of our community or just wider, samples of voters. And a lot of the time people are saying, I hate both of these parties. And we're like, we're here for it. We understand. And so what we're trying to do is say, it's okay to feel that way. Here are some things you could do, right? Whether it's voting or whether it's being in touch with elected officials. So I think the thing that we want these people to know is that increasingly in the United States, you can't win the presidency and you can't win a lot of elected offices if you don't win over independents. So this is a case where these nonpartisan voters are actually capable of reforming a lot of our democratic and social ills through their political participation in a way that partisans can't, right? Because if all you have to do is win over your base, that is not holding you very accountable, because very little that you do is going to make your base reject you, right? And say like, no, you know what, I'm changing my mind. They might sit out, but they're not going to cross party lines. And I think the parties count on that. And it means like they have very little accountability. They raise tons of money by appealing to these bases, right? And so the people that are available to actually change things and make things better are the nonpartisans. And I think we give terrible messages, or the parties do especially, to nonpartisan voters. If you look at the debate about Elon Musk forming a third party right now, people are saying, well, they'd just be spoilers. And I think, you know, my background is in consumer psychology and marketing. And so when I hear the parties say that, I imagine a company saying to voters, like, well, or saying to consumers, like, you're the problem, right? The problem is that you don't like what we're offering. And so I know it's not an instantaneous appealing solution, but the best thing you can do if you hate our politics is go vote. Vote for the lesser of the two evils, right? Vote for the person that you think is closest to what you want, even if it's not exactly what you want. Because what's going to happen over time is that whether it's one of the two parties, whether it's a third party, the person that's going to prevail at the ballot box is the person getting closer to those independents' point of view. And that's going to pull everything in a healthier direction. So I know it's not like an overnight solution, but it's the best thing that we have available to us right now.
And Sean and I have talked about, you know, the way things are going right now, the pendulum has swung so far to the right, far surpassing anything that we've ever seen before. It's bound to come back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, a lot of what Sean and I would love to see is, you know, is there a way to sort of stop that, you know, stop it in the middle somewhere so that we can kind of get back to the business of running the country and not this ridiculous, you know, garbage that's happening right now. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that independents again can get us out of this crazy pendulum swing, right? Where it's like and that's what you see with winner take all politics, right? Is like you have one side saying, oh my God, the other side is so bad, we have to win because it's an existential threat. And other parties saying the same thing, right? And so of course people don't want to participate in that because overall you end up with this dialogue that is just insane, right? And it's dehumanizing. I think that's one of the things we hear so much from people who tell us they don't want to participate in politics is they're saying like, I don't want to be called names for what I believe. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to hear that I'm a bad person for my beliefs. And so, you know, I sympathize with them. Like, it's really troubling to me that our politics has turned into just like name calling that's so unpleasant that normal, healthy people don't want to participate. I would tell you the normal, healthy people are the exact people that we need. So we're kind of calling on independence, like, come on, guys, can you please be the adults in the room? We think that we can get these deeply partisan people, we can get some of them back. We can be healthier again, but we're going to have participation from political independence.
Yeah. So a couple things with regard to numbers, Sean. I don't know if you remember, but we were talking about the number of people who didn't vote in the last election. And you know, there was such a huge number of votes or voters that we lost, you know, between 2020 and 2024. That, you know, I would imagine there's a big opportunity there. Laura, what are you seeing from a research standpoint as far as how independents are trending? Is it something that's growing or how do you see that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Independents are growing. Party identification is slipping. It's around 27% each for Democratic and Republican Party identifications right now, if you poll people. Interestingly, the youngest two generations, Gen Z and millennials, are the most likely to identify as independents, and they're around 52%.
Wow.
And so the parties have this line that they like to tell themselves, which is, no, they're going to come home, right? Like these are just young voters who don't know what they want and they're going to come home. I don't think that that's true. I think for a lot of voters, there is no home. I think a lot of voters are so disgusted with the behavior on both or one side that they just are not going to pick one of the sides. And so I think contending with independents is going to be something you have to do as a party or as a candidate to have success in future elections, because they're growing, absolutely. I saw numbers that I believe about 66% of eligible voters voted in the last election. I believe that's accurate. And so, you know, there are a lot of people sitting home, to your point earlier. And I know that a lot of Democrats appear to have stayed home or possibly switched their vote in the last election. And so, you know, I think right now the Democratic Party is kind of in a self-examination phase, or, you know, just disarray, depending on your point of view, trying to figure out how they respond to those election results. But I think that our democracy is a lot more stable and politics is less volatile if we can get those people to engage politically, because to the extent that people feel like it doesn't matter if they vote or there's no candidate for them, that is a feeling of, you know, disenfranchisement, like we've been saying, and disempowerment, that I just don't think a democracy can function like that.
Well, it's not really a democracy. I mean, we have two parties that have shut everybody else out. So you know, it's not really open. It's, you know, about as closed as you can get. And who knows what we're going to see over the next, you know, 5-6 years. It could be even worse. But as far as like cracking through that, Laura, what do you think, you know, how do you do that? Like, how do you crack through that two-party system? And, you know, Bernie tried to do it and he was shut out. I mean, we've seen, you know, pockets of the country where, you know, where they will vote and support an independent. I mean, Jesse Ventura got elected in, you know, in Minnesota, and you know, different areas of the country are more open to it. But I mean, it just seems like from a you know, White House standpoint, we're never going to get through that.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point because, you know, starting at the top, the way some of the third party initiatives have, right, and trying to elect a president is a really tall order. Presidential races are incredibly expensive. So one of the things that that people in our C4 and PAC are interested in doing is electing people to the House, independents to the House, because if you could elect only a handful, right now the margin between Democrats and Republicans in the House is actually pretty slim.
Right.
So with a handful of independents, you could deny both parties a majority, which would mean that they would not be able to do this winner-take-all style of governing. They would have to do more consensus-driven policy making. And I think that would change the dynamic pretty significantly of political discourse and governing, at least in the House of Representatives. But I think it could help to create a lot of helpful dynamics that would make politics move in a healthier direction. And I think over time, it would make it more likely that you elect independent senators and then hopefully at some point an independent president.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sean, go ahead.
Well, talk to me a little bit about the specifics, what you hear from like talking to independent voters about what they're, you know, upset about with both parties. Like with the Republicans, obviously, you know, it's the Trump party where, you know, it's either you're with them or you're against them. And then with the Democrats, what I hear from a lot of people is, especially the working class, middle class, they feel that the Democratic Party kind of left them, and they're not for them like they used to be. And actually, also their foreign policy with you know, they're too much, you know, with war, promoting, you know, the war where they used to be anti-war, and they're kind of their foreign policy with the Democrats and Republicans isn't really that much different. And that's what I'm hearing from a lot of people. What do you hear talking to independent voters?
Yeah, independent voters are actually not that different from the rest of the country in terms of their top issue, which is the economy and inflation. They want to see something done to improve their economic well-being. I think consumer confidence is really low right now. I know that in the last election, Democrats pointed to a lot of indicators of economic growth, but when you talk to voters, they aren't feeling it in their pocketbooks. And so one of the biggest things that we hear from independents now as we poll them is that they are frustrated with the things that are going on in Washington because it's a lot of stuff other than economic growth and improving the way they feel financially. So I would say that's one of the biggest things. And just in general, I think independents have a lot of concerns about the country's fiscal health, right? Because
Sure.
especially because there's a big block of these younger voters who are independents. They're looking at the debt that we are incurring and the sort of financial future as it relates to our entitlement programs. And I think they're sort of thinking of it like, this is going to land on my desk, right? Like, I'm going to have to deal with this. I'm the one who's going to have these chickens come home to roost. And I think they're really concerned about it. And nobody's talking about solving entitlements, right? In fact, both parties, right? Like if you want to talk about where there's bipartisan agreement, it seems to be bipartisan agreement that we're not going to do anything about Social Security. But the problem is when it runs out of money in 10 years or fewer, depending on who you talk to, there's going to be an automatic cut in how much people are paid in terms of benefits, right? And so that's going to have a tremendous financial effect on the people who are expecting that money. So this is a problem. I forget who calls it like the slowest moving crisis, or like the most obvious crisis in history. Like this is this like slow moving boulder that we could get out of the way, and the sooner we started, the better off we'd be. And neither party wants to do anything about it.
What about the recent cuts to Medicaid? What are you hearing from independent voters?
We haven't done any polling about that, so I can't speak to anything specific about it. You know, I would expect that just because of their financial concerns, telling them like there's additional cuts coming and you still don't feel like you have a lot of money,
Right.
you don't feel like you have wealth, you don't feel like you are financially in a position to take risks and grow and expand. That's the Medicaid cuts are likely going to be really concerning for them. So I think, you know, it's a tricky issue, right? Because
Sure.
the other thing I think is interesting is like the big beautiful bill is passed, right? But like this is the thing that the Trump administration's been holding up as here's our big landmark piece of legislation, right? And so now it's passed, but the thing is it makes existing cuts permanent, right? But it's not new cuts in terms of tax burden. So I don't know if independents are going to find that makes a big difference in their pocketbooks and their consumer confidence. And my read of the polling is that like they don't see a lot of things coming down the pike that are going to make a difference for them.
We will be right back. DK's Corner, now located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, is serving up the area's best tasting food at respectable prices. Known for our great cheesesteaks, DK's also has delicious breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and catering 7 days a week. You'll love the wraps, soups, and pizza too. We're now open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit DK's Corner on Facebook to see our daily specials, and make sure to follow and like us while you're there. We offer local delivery to homes and businesses, takeout, or come and dine in our new restaurant in Jessup. Call or text DK's Corner at 570-209-0278 or hit us up on DoorDash. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. We will be right back.
Hey, Sean, I want to make sure that everybody knows about our Patreon. I know we mention it every once in a while on the show, but really important that people check out our Patreon. If you go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, or just click on the link in the description, you'll find we do an extra episode every week called The Speakeasy, and it's really usually just Sean and I kind of talking about the day's events, current events, and things like that. But a lot of exciting things. I mean, I know, Sean, you're constantly putting articles up there on our Patreon.
Yeah, and sometimes, Bill, we do bring on special guests. We had Dave Whelan on, we had Scranton Dave, and every now and then we bring Patreon members on. We've had different members, Scott Alfieri, Michael Pilch, Dan Hankey was on. So, there's an opportunity there if you want to come on the show with us. So there's a lot of things we're doing. Like you mentioned, Bill, the articles. I put articles up on a free site, but I also put articles on Patreon that's not available on the free site. We have a lot of times I put up future intel about guests that we have coming up and stuff that we have coming up on the podcast. And, we created a great community there, Bill. There's a lot of chat goes on there. There's a community chat and a lot of the comments back and forth. Just the Patreon members always have great insight. So it's a community, Bill, and it's an opportunity for people to join for a really good price, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat it. You can certainly become a free member if you want to. There's also tiered levels with subscription amounts, and just for $1 that gets you everything. I mean, the $1 gets you everything, including our weekly show. There's other tiers. I think, Sean, what is there? A $3 tier?
$3, a $5, a $10. I mean, and there's a $50 if people could afford to give $50.
Yeah, I mean, totally up to you. Once you join, you can make that decision, and certainly, there's no commitment. I mean, you could join for a month or 2 months or whatever you want, and then you can switch your subscription around. Totally up to you. I mean, that's people love Patreon for that reason. It really is. It makes it easy. It's kind of however you want to do it, however you want to join, and we certainly appreciate anybody who joins our Patreon and supports the show, because we definitely Sean, we're not getting rich off of this podcast, that's for sure, but we definitely appreciate any support that we get from our listeners.
And we also have our merchandise store. If people want to check out, we have the shirt that I have on now. We have mugs up there. We have cups, hats, anything you can do to help the podcast grow. We also have a bookshop up there, Bill, where all the authors that we have on our podcast, we have their books up, and it supports local bookstores, Bill. The money goes to local bookstores, a little bit to us, and then to the publisher and to the author. So it's a real good opportunity instead of buying Amazon and making
supporting billionaires.
Right, sure. There's an opportunity. And as far as Patreon, one last thing, Bill, if you want to join as a free member, we do put some stuff up there for the free members, and then if you like it and you want to upgrade, you can do that.
Absolutely. So definitely check out our Patreon. Like I said, there's a link in the description to our Patreon, or you can just go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You and look for our logo, and just fill in the information and you can join. All right. That's it, Sean. We appreciate all of our Patreon members, and we hope that you guys will consider checking it out if you haven't joined. Thank you.
One of the problems I see with the country right now is the separation, and the gap is getting wider in the 1% and everybody else. And there's such a wide, with the billionaires, and they're getting increased tax cuts and the power that they have to influence elections, because you mentioned it earlier, it takes a lot of money to run to be president. And it comes down to, when they get elected, are they going to be loyal to, the interests that put them in there, or the people that voted, and the people usually get left behind.
I mean, the way I look at both parties is that they're there for themselves. They're not there for their voters, right? Like they do things that consolidate their own power and their own influence and their own fundraising. And to me, it's surprising when people look at their party in power and say, those guys are there for me, because I would say, no, those guys are all there for themselves. And you absolutely shouldn't be, in trench warfare with people of the opposite political party, because you guys are not on opposite sides, right? Like that's not what's happening in Washington right now.
Well, just what they do with the stock market. I mean, the way they invest, they get they're basically getting insider trading and making tons of money.
Yeah.
You know, that's really, that should be banned. Like, they shouldn't be able to invest because they have this knowledge, this inside
Right.
information that nobody else has, and they're making millions of dollars on this.
Yeah, and the problem is that the inmates are running the asylum and they
Yeah,
have very little interest in banning insider trading. And
no,
so, um, again, this is where I think independents really offer the only real opportunity we have for correction. Because when people are talking about the reforms that they think would make the US Congress more responsive, right? Like whether you want a ban on insider trading or term limits or an end to gerrymandering, any of these things,
sure.
the people who are going to decide that are the people who have very little interest in stopping it.
Yeah,
And I think we would be looking at a really different environment if you could elect even a small minority of independents who would have a lot of leverage and who could say, you know what, my issue that I took to voters was about term limits, or it was about the economy, or it was about entitlement reform. And I'm not playing ball with you unless we're going to work on my issue too. That's where you have an opportunity to do something different than what's going on right now.
You know, Sean mentioned the top 1%. And I think I just saw an interview with Bernie where I think he said that top 9% have more wealth than 93% of the country. It's something like that. It's something ridiculous
ridiculous
like
numbers.
that. At what point, or even, you know, do you even attempt? I mean, obviously, all of those people have an agenda, right? That's why they're there. That's why they're contributing. That's why they're furnishing these two parties. But at some point, you know, as an independent, you need money, right? You said it yourself. It takes a lot of money to run for president. How do you get that money? Is it more, you know, putting your hand out, asking for contributions, or is it at some point going to somebody who has the money, who has the means, and saying, hey, you know, help us out here because we're drowning.
Mhm. I I think this is where a strategy that tries to start with House seats is potentially one of the most effective ways to do that, because you could go to residents of a specific district within a state, right? And say, hey, if you don't like your other options, here's somebody who is interested in doing things different. Here's somebody who doesn't look like either one of the parties. And that's not to minimize the challenges either of fundraising or that you would face if you're not caucusing with a party, right? So I absolutely don't want to sound like Pollyanna, like this is easy, we can do it.
Right.
We're just saying this is the best path, and there's a tremendous amount of voter support for it. The other thing I think about, like if you want to hear a kind of a marketing analogy, is like in marketing, you think about creating consumer behavior through advertising or sales, right? Like promotions. I'm going to have to discount in order to get somebody to buy. But the key idea there is like the less appealing the action is that you're trying to create, the more money it costs. And so like, does it cost a lot of money to elect in Democrats and Republicans? Yes, it does, because I think in a lot of cases, that's really unappealing to voters. They look at those two candidates of either party and say, I guess I will go vote, right? And so I think that actually independents have a huge opportunity because they are something different. I think we can actually elect independents at a far lower cost, and there's some evidence to support this, at a far lower cost than you could members of the two political parties, just because they are a lot more appealing to voters. They are much more likely to express views that match what those voters want instead of just holding the party line.
Yeah. Yeah. Laura, I'm going to open a Pandora's box potentially here, but you know, one of the things that Sean and I talk about a lot is the current state of mainstream media and how it impacts everybody's life, because it is, you know, it is as partisan as DC is right now. There really is no mainstream independent, you know, news outlet. I mean, you're just no matter what, you know, what news channel you put on, you're going to get a slant one way or the other.
How do you combat that? I mean, obviously, you can do podcasts, which, like ours, but you're only going to get, reach a few thousand people, where, MSNBC, CNN, these channels, Fox, they're reaching, millions and millions of people. How do you combat that?
Well, it's interesting. You said something earlier that kind of makes me think along these lines, which is the parties are sort of cutting off the channels of feedback, right? And I think we're sort of seeing the same thing with media, which is like you can sort of you can report and do things the way you'd like to do. You can say to voters and unhappy consumers and the public, like, oh, we're just not going to listen if you don't like what we're selling. But they'll go somewhere else, and they will at some point manage to find the information that they think is important to them. And so I think that's what we're seeing with especially younger people just abandoning cable television. The average age of, I think, MSNBC, CNN, and Fox viewers is something like 72 to 74. Like, can you imagine, as an average age, that blows my mind. That is incredibly old. So where are all the younger people? They're listening to podcasts. For the younger two generations, their primary news source is podcasts and social media. And I know a lot of people sort of like hand wring and say like, oh no, what about journalism? What are these people hearing? But I take your point, which is that mainstream media is actually highly partisan, and they don't recognize in a lot of instances that they are not unbiased sources of news. So, I think that's a tricky thing to try and fix top down. And a lot of the time what people ask me is like, well, don't you think the problem is our media environment, and how can we fix a media environment? And to that I say, I don't know, much smarter people than me are working on that and really not making a lot of headway. And so I think like the consumers are going to vote with their feet and go to places where they think they're getting sensible information, and where it's again this sort of like partisan, polarized point of view that doesn't track with people's reality. I think they're just going to leave. And so I'm really encouraged by the increase of podcasts as a news source, and the fact that people are listening to 2 and 3 hour podcasts in order to understand an issue. The statistics on people doing these like deep dives into podcast listening to understand issues are amazing.
Yeah, I find that myself. You get sick of listening to these 7-second, clips of just something that, one sentence that somebody said out of, however many hours they're talking. And, you do want to listen, and you do want to hear a conversation about it, a rational conversation, and not back and forth yelling, and, a host who's going to 5 different panel guests at once and cutting them off after, 30 seconds. So, yeah, I mean, this form of communication, this form of broadcasting, is very valuable. But, again, it's not, I don't know that it has the numbers. It's kind of right now, we talk about it's kind of the Wild West of broadcasting. There's so much out there that people
Not only that,
don't
though,
know.
there's still a lot of podcasts that are pushing a lot of disinformation.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah, and I don't know what we do about the disinformation problem. I think that it's unlikely in my perspective, though, that being mainstream media means you're not going to fall victim to misinformation, either wittingly or unwittingly. So I don't know how we solve that problem. But I think one of the things that this interest in podcasts and deeper dives of information suggests to me is that people would like to get the information and weigh it for themselves, and that they're tired of mainstream outlets that instead of taking 2 balanced views of an issue, they take one view, and with the other side of it, they say, no, don't listen to those people. Those are the bad people, right? Like the people questioning the status quo, the people's questioning what has been defined as the norm, are instantly just sort of like, oh no, those are the racists, those are the bigots, those are the snowflakes, those are the crazy leftists, like whatever it is.
We've been called all of it, so
Well, congratulations. Yes, that you must be doing it right.
I guess so.
Yeah, people want to decide for themselves. To me, it's a really interesting, and it may be a generational difference too, of I think younger generations being accustomed to having a lot of information available to them and saying like, no, we'll decide. We don't need you to tell us what the answer is.
Yeah. Let's hope we're moving towards that, because we need some hope.
Yes.
So tell me how people could get involved with the Independent Center.
Yeah, so we have our website is www.independentcenter.org. We send out a bi-monthly newsletter that just is kind of a roundup of different things that are going on in politics, important issues for independents in particular. We answer people's questions if they have questions about particular policies. Especially, we think it's important to answer them from an independent perspective, because in a lot of cases, the discourse around a policy question is kind of insane, right? Like you have one side that's saying, the environment is a problem, and the other side saying, no, it's not. And like, this is a really crazy way to do policy discussion, whether you're talking about environmental policy, immigration, economics, healthcare, whatever. Our political conversations about those things tend to be disconnected from reality. So we try and answer questions about policy that sort of says, okay, here are some points on the right, here are some points on the left, here's what we think. You make up your own mind. So we have that newsletter. You can follow us on social media. Our website has links to all of our social channels, and we're starting to do some in-person meetups. So I'm really excited about that. We had our first one in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the beginning of July, and it was great. We had a great crowd of people turn up. We are about to do our next one in August in Boston, and there's only 48 states after that, so I got to get some help so I can I can start having meetups nationwide. But we think it's really important for people to meet each other face to face and see, like, I'm not the only one with these questions. I'm not the only one with these concerns. So we're trying to really build like a grassroots movement of people who say, oh, I am political. You can be political and not be a partisan.
Right.
No, how does the Independent Center do its polling?
Mm-hmm. So our polling is done by Bullfinch Group, which is led by Brett Lloyd. He is a very experienced political pollster. I don't know if you guys know this, but most polling is partisan. Like, you have a pollster who works for one party or the other. And so Brett is not a partisan pollster. He is a true independent. He's just interested in what the data say. And he's really great at his job. So he does our polling for us, and we do polling on a lot of different issues. As we get closer to the midterms, we'll go back to more of that polling. At this point, there's not a huge need for it the same way we are during an election cycle. But we do these, nationally representative samples. Brett also does focus groups for us. And so we have both types of information, which I think is really important, right? Like, you want these statistically valid polls that represent what voters think across the country, but then you also want to be able to have a deep dive and sit down with a room of 12 or 15 people and hear how they talk and hear what they think.
Yeah, polls don't always tell the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's why we marry them with focus groups and also one-on-one interviews,
right,
to just try and get a well-rounded perspective. And where our channels are open, we're always interested in hearing from people. We've been doing a Declare Your Independence campaign online for the past month or so, and we've just asked people to kind of like tell us how they're feeling about politics, and that's been really interesting to see the responses we get from that too.
Yeah. And, and as you said, Laura, you don't necessarily have to register as an independent to be an independent voter, right?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I always say, like, you know, the parties are the ones telling you that if you have questions about what they're doing, you're not one of them. And we won't say that to you. So we
Yeah.
are people who have questions about public policy. We have questions about our elected officials. And if you vote straight ticket Republican and you feel like you're an independent, you can sit with us. You can be one of us. If you're straight ticket Democrat, same thing. We're just a lot of people who care about public policy and want to see it done in a thoughtful way. And so we're here for whoever wants to throw their hat in. You know, there's not a litmus test. There's not a secret handshake.
Yeah.
Well, what do you seek, you know, from government? What type of leadership do you want to see? Because I'll tell you, for me personally, like my politics has always been middle, kind of left, maybe a little bit. And Bill knows this. We and he said this before, that we try to avoid the extremists on both sides because it's impossible to deal with. But for me right now, I mean, this is the first time in my lifetime that I'm against every single thing this administration is doing. And I don't want to get political. I don't want to get, but I'm just telling you honestly, like I can't support anything they're doing right now. So I'm looking for anything to just get rid of this nonsense that's going on right now. But what are you looking for leadership wise out of the government, specifically the office of the presidency?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we would say about the presidency is it's one person, right? And like what we need is, and it's so easy to focus on the president, but I think it really is, it's distorting our sense of politics, right? Like the single-minded focus on the president and what he's doing and saying. I mean, yes, he's influential and I don't want to discount that. He's the most powerful person on earth. But there's governing is happening in our communities, in our cities and counties. You can influence that, right? Like you can call your mayor, you can donate to your mayor, you can go to council meetings, right? And board meetings. There's a huge opportunity for influence there. And I think this single-minded focus on the president and what the president is doing is not good because it's like it's giving away all of our agency. So we would like to see people sort of thinking of government differently as something that like government and governing is something we can all participate in. And in terms of policy positions, we tend to favor policies that give people the most choice in their lives, right? So we think individuals should be allowed to decide to the maximum extent possible things like, right, like having portable healthcare policy, right? Giving people flexibility about how they save for retirement, right? So we sort of orient all of our policy positions around the idea of like maximizing choice for people because we think that's how you let people make the decisions that are best for them rather than telling them, here's, here, we fixed it for you, we solved it for you. So I would say all of our values are oriented around this idea of individual choice and individual agency.
I agree with everything you said there. The change does have to start at the local level and work up from the community. But the problem that I see right now is that, and you mentioned the presidency, the president's not supposed to be a king. There's supposed to be checks and balances to stop him from doing certain things. And right now, I don't see those checks and balances. That's my concern. I don't see Congress acting in that, with any type of check or balance. I don't see the Supreme Court doing that. And this is the problem that I have right now. And I understand that you have to start at the local level. There's things you could do, but at the top level, I mean, it's a real disaster right now. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. We need all of the branches of government jealously guarding their authority and their power, right? Like we need Congress to say, no, you've overstepped. This is our purview. That is vitally important. And they're not doing it right now. The only sort of hope that I can offer is that by shifting the dynamic, by electing some independents, that it would change the way Congress relates to the president. Because the dynamic we see right now, I know the Republican Party, a lot of the members are saying, well, what do you expect? We have a Republican president and a Republican controlled House and Senate. That's not true. They have not been rubber stamps of the president in previous administrations. You can point to a lot of historical examples where
Sure.
Republican-led or Democratic-led House or Senate bucked the president and said, nope, not happening. Whether it's Supreme Court justices, policy issues, right? Like they are not meant to be rubber stamps. And I completely agree that we need them to exercise their authority in order to bring balance back.
Let's hope that happens, because it certainly has not in this administration. Laura, one of the things you talked about was sort of starting at the local level and, learning about local politicians. And I think that's becoming more and more difficult to do with, newspapers sort of dying out. People are, as we've mentioned, people are canceling their cable, and so they're not getting their local news. And really all that they're hearing about is what's happening nationally. What's your suggestion as far as, for people to get educated with what's going on around them, literally right around them?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really important point that you're making. And so I don't want to at all seem like I'm dismissing the challenges with staying informed or participating in the local level, because certainly too, people are working all day, right? And they've got kids and they don't have time to, in addition to all their other responsibilities, track local government. So I think one of the things that can be really helpful is that a lot of local governments, especially if you talk to local elected officials and even the employees, right? Like the non-political employees of local government, they take their roles very seriously in terms of being accountable to voters. And so they're putting out information through a website, through press releases, even through social media to try and keep people abreast of city and county happenings. And so you can go straight to the source in some cases. And I think that's really important. But I think the bigger thing, so I was just talking on a podcast recently to someone who called it pseudo-politics. The idea that reading national political news and commenting on it and sharing it is a form of political participation. And so I think that actually that's a really important point that we need to raise awareness about, which is that that's not being political. That's something else. It's closer to gossip. What we really need is for people to call your elected official, especially members of the House and Senate, give them a call, send them an email. If you can get to Washington, in almost any case, they will meet with you in person. So I know that's not a reality for everybody, but if you hadn't thought that actually your state members of Congress would meet with you, please know that either they will or some of their legislative staff will meet with you, and you can say this stuff in person, and it absolutely makes a difference. So I think we have to use all the channels that are available to us.
What
100% agree.
Go ahead, Billy.
No, you go ahead, Sean.
No, I just what like independent politicians out there now do you feel are doing great work? Because Billy mentioned Jesse Ventura earlier.
I'd forgotten all about Jesse Ventura.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning him.
Well, the thing is, I talked to people in Minnesota, and he was a true independent. He was discussing with both parties, and I talked to people in Minnesota, and they loved him. I mean, he was a great governor. He was actually for the people. He did a lot of things. Like, what candidates are out there that show that type of leadership?
Yeah, so there are a number of independents currently in the House. And I don't want to name names because we're not we're trying to
Right,
not
sure.
endorse candidates or sitting members. But yeah, there are a number of independents. We think they bring a really important dynamic to those bodies. Another thing that I think is incredible is the number of governors, senator or senatorial candidates and candidates for House of Representatives who are launching runs in 2026 is really encouraging. So I think this is part of a much broader movement of people who are saying, I feel a call to run for office, and I don't want to do so as a member of either of those parties. They reach out to us a lot. I can't do very much for them because I'm a C3 and I can't support people running for office. But
Right.
we do try to connect them with resources in terms of expertise and other organizations that support independent candidates. So to me, that's one of the most encouraging things, is just like there's something bigger happening. People have been talking about a realignment of the two parties for a few years now. And something is clearly shifting, because there's, incredibly a lot of interest among voters, but also among people running for elected office and running and voting for independents.
I think we need a common sense party. I think
Yeah. The adults in the room party.
Exactly.
I'd be happy to vote for those guys. Yeah, like I think that there are a lot of people just saying, you guys on either side have kind of gotten out of touch with what the rest of us think. And so, my concern is that like voters are waiting for the candidate who aligns with them before they're going to show up at the ballot box. And what
Yeah.
we're trying to say to people is, you got to start casting your ballot before you get that guy who matches, or gal who matches your preference. Like, it's sort
Right.
of like, if you build it, they will come. Like,
Right.
that's what we're saying to voters, is like, just get out there and start voting, start making your values known, call your member of Congress and say, hey, I voted because I voted specifically for somebody to address economic issues. You guys are doing everything else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
the majority
You
of
have to chip
people-
away at it. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
The majority of people, I think, are pretty close to, if you have discussion with people, even if they go maybe middle right, middle left a little bit, but you talk to them, the interests are the same, the concerns are the same.
Mhm.
It's just that the neither party are addressing that, and the extremists on each side are controlling the party.
Yeah, and the parties, I think, are driving a lot of this narrative of like, well, you can't talk to those other guys, like they're terrible, right? Like, and people are starting to believe this, and if you are talking to somebody and something political comes up, they kind of they'll look at you for a second and be like, oh, should I say this? Are we gonna agree? Right. And that's crazy, because I think you're absolutely right. For the most part, people are fairly close to one another in the center.
Sure.
I have research showing this. There are other organizations showing this. People are not nearly as divided on their policy positions or just their larger political values as the media rhetoric makes it seem, and as the two parties make it seem. So if we keep listening to their story about, how terrible the other side is and how divided we are, like, it's not true.
No. Go ahead, Billy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 100% agree with you, Laura. It's just the climate right now is disgusting. And, you have to, like I said, you have to chip away. You have to be able to, understand that you do make a difference, right? Everybody has a vote. Everybody's vote counts the same. And, you have to research, you have to look at the different candidates and not just say, I'm going to vote for this person because I'm going to vote for this person because he's a Democrat or because he's a Republican. If they don't align with your ideals, even if it's, I mean, again, you have to look at each individual issue, right? And say, okay, this person I may not align with everything that they stand for, but there are certain things, important things that they stand for that I'm, 100% with. And so that's why I'm going to vote for them. And, turn off the noise. I guess that would be my advice to people.
Or go listen to somebody that you think disagrees with you, you
Yeah.
might be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody, I was talking to an independent voter as part of an interview a while ago, last summer. And he said, I don't even vote along party lines anymore. I just vote for whoever seems like they're a decent person. And he had some reasons about why that was the case, but I think a lot of voters are there actually already. They're doing what he's doing, which is just saying, you know what, whoever's decent is who I'm going to vote for. I don't have to have perfect agreement. And
Yeah,
I think the thing that would be really, I think everybody wants like a Superman or like a white knight to come in and be like, there's the presidential candidate we all wanted who's going to solve all of our problems. But I think that's not all that different from having the president as a king, right? Is like expecting that
Right.
there's going to be one person who solves all of our problems and that we all look at and go, yeah, there's the guy that we want to be in charge. That's not how our democracy was designed to work. It was designed to work with us, doing the work of voting and doing the work of engaging in politics. So I don't think it's, if we keep waiting for that person, we're not going to solve our problems.
Well, I think the biggest problem is that person would never want to be president.
Right. There you go. I agree with that. I actually think the president should be, we should just what's it called? Like impress them into service, right? Or like we should just select them. We should be like, look, we took a national poll. You're it. I'm sorry, this isn't what you wanted to do for the next 4 years, but like, you got to do it. We just need your help.
Yeah. 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 And, Sean and I have done enough of these episodes, or we've talked about this so many times, but, from our standpoint, really the last person who, you could say was a shining bright light was assassinated November 1963.
Wow.
And it's been a cesspool ever since. And, unfortunately, with just one, one of these same types of people after another. So hopefully, maybe someday we'll have another president like that, but not
I thought
likely.
what you were going to say is the last person who should be president is somebody who wants to be president.
Yeah,
I
well,
was going to agree with that.
That is absolutely the case. Unless they want to be president because they want to help people, right? They want to,
Right.
serve the public, which is what government should be doing. If that's your motivation for wanting to be president, yeah, I'm all for that. If it's I want power, then that's not what we're looking for. So
Problem is you get these people that are already wealthy, right? And then you ask yourself, well, why do they even want a job that pays $200,000? And then they get in there and they actually increase their wealth. And I think that's what, how do they do that? We know how to do that. And that's what really aggravates a lot of people. It aggravates the common person.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting, like all of these things end up being far more complex than anybody would think. So when you're talking about Congress raising its wages or voting to give themselves pay increases, like as it turns out, that's probably one of the biggest things they could do that would make it possible for people of less means to get elected to office, or for it to be sensible for them to actually hold office. Right? Because you're talking about, this is very expensive. It's going to involve homes in 2 places, travel between 2 places. And yeah, if you are a normal person making a normal salary, that's not something that you're going to be able to do. So, I think in a lot of cases, like the solutions to making our politics more representative may be kind of counterintuitive, because I know nobody likes the idea of paying Congress more. They're the least popular people in this country.
That's true.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Lura, this has been fascinating. Great
Yeah,
conversation.
great.
Sean, I don't know. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we covered everything. Thank you for coming on. I mean, this has been fantastic.
Thank you. I might be delusional, but I am like one of the few, I think, optimistic and hopeful people about politics, because I talk to people every day who want to run to be public servants. I talk to voters who are trying to do something in their own community about enfranchising more independents, or just being more engaged in politics. So I see a huge potential for things to change. And I feel lucky to get to wake up and do this job every day.
That's great. That's great to hear. It's encouraging, that's for sure, in a time where we really need it. So
We
that's
need it.
good.
Yeah, we definitely need it.
All right, Laura. Anything
Well,
else? Anything else before we wrap up?
No, just come check out the website. We'd love for you to sign up and get the newsletter, find out about in-person meetings. We have a book club if you're interested in that sort of thing. So this is one of my colleagues calls this hand-to-hand conversation. This is like we're out there talking to people, trying to get a movement going. So we would be grateful for any kind of support.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, we're happy to provide support for you. That's for sure.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Thank you.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.